It's been a while since I've been working on laying out the most simplified version of full-length tutorials for you. That includes modeling, texturing, quick animations, and rendering different things. And finally, I have the first in lineup. Now, to help the design community, I've also started my Patreon, so please do join my Patreon to unlock exclusive 3D content. We'll start with Blender's interface. First off, I'll just distribute this space, add one more panel to it, and switch it to Image Editor, where I'm going to add my reference photo. That's a simple apple right there. I'm going to be deleting this cube and add my sphere to it. So I'm going to keep the chatter to the minimum and let you guys follow up on the strokes, keystrokes that are shown on the bottom. I'm going to pick up the first vertex on the top, select the proportional editing, and by doing so, I am able to drag and affect the relevant vertices, joining vertices along with that vertex as well. I'm going to repeat the same practice at the bottom vertex, lift it up a little bit, and while you're doing so, you can drag your wheel up and down to reduce the effect of that proportional editing. Try doing that, because I'm going to be using that every now and then. Now I'm just selecting a few faces. You can select them randomly to create those little dents, like 4 little dents at the bottom of the apple, which we can normally see. I've selected the normal from the top, so the scaling only takes place at the normal side of those faces. And as you can see, I've once again used my wheel to reduce the effect of it on neighboring vertices, and I've just lifted them up in the Z space. There you go. That looks better. I'm going to try and do the same thing, but this time I've picked up one face and I'll try to just make it more natural. I'll just lift up some of the faces from some sides. I'm going to drop in some of those faces inside to create just some random roughness on top of this apple, as you can see me doing. So doing so, you can rotate this apple around from different sides and see and fit to your creative vision. Just so you know, this tutorial isn't marking up some of the most best optimal techniques. I'm trying to make use of simple techniques to help you create something and get on the flow quickly, right? And these techniques are probably usable on pretty much all the different objects that you're going to be modeling in future. So now I'm just picking up this vertex and I'll see if I can add more rings at the area where I'll need more geometry. When I'm going to drop down the central vertex, I'll need more geometry around it. So I'm creating these ripple edges. If you press Ctrl R, as you can see from the keystrokes shown on the screen, this will help you create these rings inside. So you can see I've got a bit more geometry on top now. If I pick up this vertex and drop it down, we're getting a much more subtle dent at the top. I'm going to pick a few more faces, I think, around this area, but first I'll just scale these down a bit. Something like this. Right. Shade smooth by angle is important, so you can see how it's looking. We've got a few of these sharp edges at the bottom. Let's fix them up quickly with an easy hack. Let's just add a deformer to it. Go to settings, add modifiers, generate and subdivision surface. Well, they're gone. That should do for us. Yep. Okay, well, disable it for now. And if I go back into edit mode, which you can do by pressing tab, you can now go to select faces and just pick random faces up. I'm going to do the same thing, creating some dents, this time on the top of the apple, and scaling it down as well. So I've got all this time, I've got my proportional editing on. So what we want is that whenever we maneuver any of the vertices around, we want the neighboring vertices and faces to be affected with it relatively. So yeah, I think that's looking better now. What should we do next? Let's turn it on. Okay, let's add a cylinder. Be creating the central, what do you call it? A twig? Yeah, let's just call it twig for a moment. Reduce the radius and the height of it. Here we call it depth. And just move it up. Let's pop it up from the apple. Now, if you got any questions during this chatter, you can just leave them in the comments. I'll try to get back to you guys. Here I've just created some more edge loops inside that cylinder, so we've got more control over creating this kind of shape, and I'm just selecting once again those edges and rotating them around simply. Notice that I've got my normal mode on the top. So right, let's add a subdiv to this to make it more smoother, but here on the top we've got some of these funny edges, so Control R, add an edge loop and lift it up. At the bottom we don't need it, so let's just leave it the way it is. Select this edge loop, scale it up a little bit, another one, scale it up, but as I do so I'll move my mouse wheel down so I can reduce the effect of that scaling to the relative edges. Okay, I think that's one done. Let's make a copy of it. Shift D and R to rotate it, and then S to scale it down. Let's attach it along. We're going to be adjusting these things now and then, later on in this tutorial, but for now I'm just keeping it as simple as possible. Let's push it down a little bit. So I think we've got a reasonable start now. Hide these apple, and let's do the petal. Let's quickly make a simple petal using a cube. Tab to subdivide, and I'm going to increase the subdivisions something like this. Well, you can use the plane as well, a lot of different techniques to make it, but I'm just trying to keep it as simple as possible for everyone to follow up. You'll notice that I'm using Z and switching to wireframe every now and then before selecting these vertices, allowing me to select everything from top to bottom. And then once again I'm scaling these vertices down and using the wheel to enlarge or scale down the area of effect. Now we've got it top to bottom selected, we've got a rough shape of leaf, and let's reduce the height of this thing a bit more. Something like that is enough. Yep, that looks about right. Let's select these vertices, move them up. Still I've got my proportional editing on. Keep that in mind. Okay, let's switch back to global. Push them down. No, I think proportional is off. Yeah, now it's better. So creating that dent right in the middle of the leaf, creating that sort of a bend. And I'll follow the same technique around the leaf here and there by picking up different edges, edge loops, and using the same translation along with proportional editing to affect and create little dents, little bends here and there before we can apply the subdivision modifier and make things smoother. Let's just fast forward this a bit. And I think that looks about right. It's a good time for us to bring back the apple. And let's place this leaf by scaling it down and placing it where it belongs. I love the shortcut system in Blender. It's like grab. To hold something, to fetch something, you just use the grab G key. To rotate something, you just use the R. And to sort of scale something, you just use the S. So G, R, S are quick keys for you to work on. I'm just using them all the time. And the moment you press G, then you can select X, Y, Z as well to pick up an axis where you want to move something. So that's just very handy for you to move around in the 3D space while being in Blender. We've just parented some of these elements to the apple. Now it's a single element, as you can see if we move around. Let's drag this up and switch over to shader editor. We'll be creating a shader for our apple. New material from the material side and pick up the color from the apple. I will be using noises this time. As if you notice apple, we've got three main things happening on it. We've got a big splatted dots on it, big splashes of it. Then we've got very small, delicate, very tiny noise materials, particles on it if you notice. And then we've got some vertical lines. So I'm going to use the same noise 3 times to create these 3 different effects. First off, use this noise texture we can add by using Shift A and then type noise texture to add it. And let's connect that to our base color. You can see we've got some texture going on. We'll be using a ramp. pick up two colors from the apple. One is red and another one is that yellowness, greeniness from the apple. Something lighter. Okay. If I turn around, I think I'll be able to show you the noise that we've got on the apple now. Yeah, so that'll give us big splashes on this apple. Something like that, yeah. Just going to tweak these a bit until I get exactly what I'm looking for. This is a very handy tool, this noise texture. This will help you make wonders. So this is done. I think just tweak it a bit, and I will just select both of these nodes now, the noise texture and color ramp, Shift D to duplicate them and then use them again. That's going to be the process we will be using. Let's do that, Shift D, and drag them up. Now we're going to use this variation for tiny particles, so let me just scale it up a little bit to create those very tiny minute particles there, and adjust these sliders to minimize the number of particles. Hope you get what I mean now. So we've got two different noises going on. We'll mix them together, add them together, but before do that, we'll create vertical lines as well using the same noise textures. Right, so for that I'll just use Control T, but we need a node wrangler on from the preferences. So if you don't have it, go to preferences, add-ons, and type in search node wrangler and turn this check on. But if you don't have it, you can still, pick up these nodes yourself by just dragging from the vector and typing mapping. It'll give you a vector, and then from connect this vector to typing coordinates, and you'll get the coordinates of the object. Right, so you've got this noise which is like evenly distributed everywhere. Well, we want to stretch this out. We want to convert this into vertical lines. So I will be using scaling here more or less to stretch these noise in the right axis. Let me see which one works. Yeah, I think this one works, right? Something like that, yeah. Just to keep in mind, we will be tweaking these materials every now and then once we start making them till the end, sometimes even in the render phase where we're establishing the shot. We will be working on tweaking these materials. So now let's just mix up these two nodes, which we created first, by using a mix node and connecting these two and seeing how they look like together. This is what it looks like. We'll be using this result of this now to add with the vertical lines that we've created above. So let's just finalize this by using the mode add. And as I said before, we'll be adjusting this every now and then when we come back. This is a creative process, so that's how it goes. And using the same node, Shift D to connect it with the previous input, and now connect it with the vertical noise. Connect it to the final base color, and there you have it. So I will switch down the mix mode from add to mix for a final result. Yeah, and I think we'll just use some adjustments here and there. Okay, we've got some rings. The rings are wrapped around in circles around the apple. Yeah, I think this looks about right. I'll just adjust the scaling. I'm not really convinced with the final. I think that looks about right. Just adjust that a bit. So I'm reducing the vector, so if I move it completely to the left, the result of A will be shown. If I move it completely to the right in the vector, result of B will be shown. So when the vector is in the middle, that is 0.5, that is how much you're mixing two results of A and B together. So you can see that, And here in 0.5, both are equally mixed. Yeah, I think that looks good. But since this is wrapped around in circle, we need to adjust that. It needs to come from the center of the twig and leaf towards the out. So let's connect the UV to the vector and use the UV information of our apple to map the texture on top of it. Right, so let's go to add up a plane quickly for testing up how things look up with some shadows and get some more insight into how the light should be adjusted and how things would look if we add an environment to it, which was going to be an HDRI. Picked up this Studio Small light from HDRI Haven. That's Poly Heaven now. If you turn off the light, you've got a complete studio light setup here, which is a dynamic lighting environment. Let's reduce the strength to something like 0.35, and that looks about decent. We've got it fairly lit around. Make some adjustments once again. Okay, I think it's about good time for us to start with the texture of this so-called twig, and let's make it brown. Add a color ramp to it. For some variation, we'll use 2 variations of brown from picking up from the apple that we have, and also connect it with the texture mapping node. Before we do that, well, let's adjust the noise. As you can see, the noise, it's slightly stretched upwards, so to make it more evenly textured, I'll press U and pick up project for Smart UV project. This will evenly texture the entire noise on our cylinder. Pick up this small duplicate that we have, select the big one, press Shift L and link material. So it'll basically replicate the material from the bigger twig. There we have it. Now let's do the leaf the same way we've done previously. So I'll fast forward it. Keeping the approach same, so you can practice the same thing again and again and get a bit more hang of it. Okay, let's pick up a displacement node from this material of apple that we've created. This time we're working on aging, so we'll create those aging dents. I've connected the output of the bigger noise that we created first and now the smaller noise, so you can compare two side by side. And I'm using the bigger noise to connect it with the displacement. Now you can see the effect of all those noises combined with the displacement, how it has actually physically looked like you've got some displacement going on this, but displacement is coming out instead of inside. So I'll adjust the scale and make it negative first off and reduce its intensity as well. So it's going inside now. I think this is relevant into your creative vision, how you would like to depict the apple. Is it like farm fresh? Is it's got a bit of aging going on? So yeah, just to create a bit of a realism, I am tweaking the parameter and seeing how the results are going to look like. That looks fairly reasonable. Let's zero this one out. Okay, well, we're in a good space. Let's just color manage and set up medium high contrast to this. Get a bit more sharpness into our image. And as I said, there are always little tweaks I'm making as we go towards the render process. Okay, well, if you go to material and you can change the material of the floor, just making it darker. We will work on removing this completely later on, but for now I'm just trying to make more sense of how things are coming out. To adjust the roughness of this apple. Roughness will actually control the shininess of how much the apple is going to shine, or how much is it going to absorb the light. Let's rotate it around and pick up an angle that we think is not going to look good for our renders. For now, we're just doing some test renders, so This button right here will remove everything that is overlaid on top of our 3D space, so you can do that to kind of see how the renders are going to look like instead of actually opening up a render windows separately. So I'm adjusting the sample size to 200 and seeing as it looks coming together. A little tweaks here and there. You can always select the camera and go to view, align active camera to view, so your view is now exactly what your camera sees, okay? And then press Shift tilde to zoom in and out using WASD, the gaming keys. And you can also move around the mouse while using Shift tilde at all. And where you're going to press the left keys, that's exactly where your camera is going to settle up. So just so you know, these few tips here and there. Pressing home will actually just fit your camera into the perspective, into the layout actually. And if you hit render, this is what it's gonna look like. Woohoo, we've got ourselves a decent render here. Okay, I've gone through and did some quick improvement to my leaf. I wasn't satisfied, so that's part of the creative process. Keep revisiting, adding loops and adjusting them here and there. I thought it was looking much better this time. Yeah. Adjusting the space to improvise. And this is what our renders look like. There you go. Bit of a noise right there, but that's okay. Now it's a good time to add a plane that we're going to use as a background. And, well, let's just also select our camera and set up the scene a little bit. So before we created a plane for ground, this time we'll create something for the background. Let's just rotate it on the y-axis, scale it up. And let's move it back. Oops, how is it not working? Oh, I think we've got the local selected, so it's moving it in the local axis. Let's just switch over to global. And now it will go back to x-axis. Hey, so the camera, let's just zero out everything. So it's an origin, nothing has changed. Now to head back into wireframe mode, let's move it back in the x-axis, sorry. Yep. Select the camera and move it back. Move it up a bit. Let's rotate it. And now in order to see through the camera, we can always press 0. And let's make one more view here and press 0 right here so we see exactly what the camera sees in this viewport. Let's rotate it. It's gonna be, oops, R and X. Let's rotate it on the x-axis. Got to straighten it up and press 90, so it's 90-degree rotated. And let's move it back on x-axis, grab and press X to move it just along the x-axis and zoom it out. There you go. Don't need the plane anymore, I think. Yeah, that should be sufficient. Alright, well, let's set up the render, see how things are looking like. Okay. For the background, let's just darken it up completely, I think. I'm pressing T and N keys to clear up the space, so I see the render clearly in the left viewport. You can set the focal length to 85 or 50. Let's just keep it 50 for this one. Make a new material for the background, and I'm going to completely remove the roughness so there is no shininess, any reflection of any light coming from anywhere, and I'm lifting it up so it's not completely dead black but slightly more lit so we can see the outer edges of our object. As you can see right now. Okay, well, it's a good time to add a light. Area light is what I'm picking. As you can see, it's shining at the top. I can scale it up, but I think it's a better approach to use the size parameter in light and improve the power. Well, that's much better now. We've got a completely heads-up light on top of our apple. Let's move it up. Okay, we'll Shift D, make a copy of it, rotate it along the y-axis, and we are creating a key light now. And I'll use rotate Z to rotate it a bit more, give it a bit more angle now, so it looks like it's looking towards the apple. So R, Z, and we've got that nice key light location here. We can tweak it later on, now and then. I think it looks fairly reasonable. Yeah. Okay, now to better visualize these lights, I think we can turn off and on to see what's happening, and turn off the environment light completely. So I'll select my key light, Shift D to make a duplicate of it, and rotate it along the Z-axis. We'll be using this light to create a fill, sort of rim light that is going to wrap our apple, giving it a sideline from top to the side. So I'm just adjusting that. So it's not completely behind it, but it's slightly behind and slightly on top of it. So let's rotate it up, adjust it a bit, and make it look down, make it look slightly sideways. I should increase its size, bring it to the side, about here. I think it's a good idea for you to every now and then move the lights around and see how they are making an effect to your creative vision, and according to that adjust the light, whatever you have in mind. Usually we get these kind of briefs from the clients as well, so it's a good idea to invest your time into practicing and trying different things out with light. I think we're getting a good side light here. Rotate it around and see if we can cover up some of these dents at the bottom as well. So yeah, that part is now a bit visible, giving it a little bit of shape that now the viewer knows that we've got something going on at the bottom as well. So if you turn on the key light, you can actually see a nice rim side to back. So I'm going to keep this part darkened up. So we've got enough light on one side, and lift up the background. We've got our light obstructing the background panel, so let's just move our background panel deep on the x-axis, first scale it up and then move it back. Yep. Okay, now we've got visibility better. We've got a whole apple visible now from all the sides. Can increase this light's intensity. Well, that's once again your choice. Now I think it's a good time for us to have a look at the heads-up light that we created before. So let's turn it on. You can see it lit nicely on the top side. And if I can use the copy of it to place it at the bottom here, but rotate it upwards, we've got a bit of fill from the bottom as well. Not too much, so we'll reduce the intensity of it, move it down. Yeah, so they're not very obvious, but they are there, if you know what I mean, right? Because when you're in 3D space, everything is actually making some difference, but you don't have to make it just very obvious. Keep it simplified. I'm going to reduce the size, maybe change this a bit. I've got my bottom light panel and I'm changing the size so it's covering more area, this time reducing that hard circle of reflection around the apple. So the greater the size is going to be, the more softer it's going to land upon the object. Okay, let's switch over to animation timeline, and on the first frame go to rotation, press I, go to the end frame rotation and change the rotation to something like 360. Okay, and press enter and press I, so we've got that keyframe there as well. So we've got the first frame and the end frame. In the middle, we need we've got a 360 rotation, which is a very simple Apple rotation going on here. Okay, that's simple. Let's do something right in the middle. So here, place a keyframe on the location. At the start of the timeline, we'll move it down and place a keyframe here. At the end, once again, we'll move it down and place a keyframe using the letter I. Now, if you scrub through the timeline, you can see this animation happening. Very simple, effective, old school. Switch over to Graph Editor, unhide everything else, because we're also working with just the Z location. Okay, let's just select the top key, S, scale it up, so it remains more at the top and then it goes down. I'll pick up this handle right here, move it up. And this handle, move it up. Okay, so now you can see it goes up really quick and then it comes down even quicker now after this change. And whoop down, and then goes up slowly, stays there for a while, and then whoops down. So that's the routine that I had in mind, a simple routine. I'm just going to add one more keyframe in the middle, changing the rotation a little bit, so when it goes up and stays there for a while, there's a bit of rotation going on. So I've done that, place a keyframe I, and I think we'll just, okay, there is that little dip in the middle that happens here, right there. Well, to adjust that, go to Graph Editor, and which one of the 6 attributes are we looking at? We are looking at the rotation that we just set up, and that's our rotation Y. You can see there's a sharp keyframe here. Select that and press T to make it Bezier. And now you have that gone. It's all clear. Smooth animation from bottom to top and then coming back. That's about it. You can switch over to render view and you can see that. To switch over to render view, you can always press Z and change from wireframe to texture to render whatsoever. Turn off the overlay viewers. So now you've got nothing coming up on top. And we've got ourselves a complete animation. To do that, rendering it, just select the number of samples you want. If you want the denoise to be there or not. In my case, it's your personal choice. Denoise is going to land up a bit of finished glossy feel to your apple if you've got very less samples, but I think in my case I'm not looking for denoiser at all. I just need a bit of rough surface, a bit of noise to be there on the image. It just makes it look more legit. So let's do that and select the format. Everything is good here. We've got frame start 1 to 80, which is good. Pick up the folder where you want to save it and give it a name. Now we've got RGBA going on here, which means the RGB with alpha, and this will allow you to save an image as a transparent so you can add a background later on. And you can do that by going to the output, and in film you can select transparent. Yep. So I've got my plane hidden before. I turn this transparency on and now you can see it's a transparent image. If I save it now with RGBA, my final image is going to be transparent, but if I turn the background on, which I want in this case, I'll have the background there, which I certainly want. I'm turning on the HDRI back on. That's too bright, so let's reduce it down. Even less than that would be better. You just need a bit of fill light around, so it's personal choice. Like just a natural light to be around it, so that's good. I'm going to reduce the background once again to a darker black because the brighter black doesn't make any sense. Yeah, I think we've got a good That's no light, no HDRI light. That's a bit of HDRI light now. I think it looks better this way. Let's keep it this way then. Okay, well, we are ready to render this. Okay, let's head over to render animation, and this will start rendering it. The render is finished. You can go to view animation, and this should have your animation running. Now that's it for today. Do subscribe, and if you'd like to download these source files and dive deeper into today's content, then join my Patreon. What shall I do next? Do comment down, and I'll see you in the next one. Forest Tech, signing out.